Welcome back to Mazzy's Music and another stupendous episode of It's the Music Stupid. Now, I can't decide if this is an amazing episode. You can, but hopefully, if my goal is for you to be introduced to at least one record out of the 5 records I pull each time. So here we go. These are about the music, not specific pressings. That's not what this is about. I say that repeatedly because I can't assume that everyone watching this has watched these before. I try to be generous in that respect. So be it. So the first record I want to show is from 1970, and to me it's a British folk rock masterpiece, and that's Father and Gay. And this is an album, this is an American edition, an OG, original gangsta, original copy for you folks that don't understand the hipster lingo of record collecting. 1970, produced by Joe Boyd. Joe Boyd obviously produced probably the bulk of the British folk rock records of the late 60s, starting with, Fairport Convention, some incredible string band, all these, Nick Drake, I mean, so many people. In fact, if you get a chance to read his autobiography, I think it's really interesting, and he's done some amazing records. He's an American expatriate. But anyway, my favorite probably of those is Fairport Convention, and of course the singer Sandy Denny. She quit Fairport Convention, as far as I'm concerned, way too early. I think she wanted to write more. They were going into sort of a rock hybrid of traditional folk music, and Sandy Denny not only is an amazing golden voice, one of the most beautiful voices in folk rock music, especially out of Britain, but even worldwide. She quit and wanted to write more, and she starts this band with several other people, including her future husband, Trevor Lucas, an Australian who joined this band. Unfortunately, only made one record, so don't know how impatient Sandy Denny was. Obviously, she had some alcohol abuse issues over the years, and she wanted to do she had a perfectionist in her performance, and I never saw Fairport Convention or Sandy Denny at all, and unfortunately, tragically, she died way too young. But this is a wonderful folk rock record. Liege and Leaf is probably my favorite Fairport, another Joe Boyd production. That's probably my all-time favorite of all the British 60s into the 70s folk rock records, but this is no slouch. Lovely record. I think it has 5 or 6 original compositions by Sandy Denny. There is a Bob Dylan cover, and there is a song by Gordon Lightfoot. The Gordon Lightfoot song, The Way I Feel. The Dylan song is Too Much of Nothing. Too much of nothing to make a do-do-do-do. Did Dylan sing that? I don't think he did. When I went to camp, we used to call it Jewish commie camp, Zionist camp in a way. We used to sing a lot of those kind of songs, like the ship. When the ship comes in, another Dylan song. He did record that one. I'm digressing here, but number one on It's the Music Stupid, Father and Gay. Get this record if you like folk rock, especially British folk rock. That is a very favorite genre of mine. That like from Pentangle 68. Obviously, the guitar players, Bert Jansen, John Renbourn, and Richard Thompson, and all that through these variety of wonderful bands. Father and Gay, a fantastic album. Something that might be a little maybe new to you. And I think they only put out 2 full albums, and that is Jesse Sykes and the Sweet Hereafter. Reckless Burning. I believe this is the debut album. Now, when I first heard her, my friend Brooks turned me on to them, and I got a CD of theirs originally, and then I found these albums. They're not so easy to find. I think they're easy, but you got to pay, but they're not super expensive. She has this slight voice of like a Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane, a little bit. Not as strong, not as bold, not as intense as Grace Slick could get. But this is, again, there's a certain similarity in terms of this is, you could say, folk rock, but there's a psychedelic element to it and a dirgy guitar. So sometimes there's beautiful acoustic guitars, and sometimes there's slow moving electric, fuzzed out distortion on the guitars. They have a little bit of that feeling like the Cowboy Junkies in their moodiness, although they do kick it up a couple notches occasionally. I really enjoy this record again, Sweet Hereafter. This record is called Reckless Burning. I believe this is from 2003 or 2004. She actually started this band with Phil Wancher from the band Whiskey Town, and they joined forces with the other musicians and put this together. So there are definitely some folk country influences on here. I wouldn't say post-punk. They don't really kind of rise to that level about their music, but just a really a lovely, lovely record. Now a 1982 band that had, I'm thinking, 4 records, and I have all of them, and that is Translator, a power pop band, rock and roll band. They're a new wave band, and they were signed to 415 Records, which was a label created by Howie Klein and Chris Nabb. Chris Nabb was in San Francisco, started 415 Records. Howie Klein started 415 Records along with him, eventually was picked up by Columbia. They also were doing Romeo Void then, and several other bands. And Translator was probably the most of the melodic harmonies, a little Birds-like, a little Flamin' Groovies, 70 period Flamin' Groovies with that power pop sound. 2 songs in particular here were played on at least local radio and probably FM radios around the country, is Everywhere and Everywhere That I'm Not, the opening song on here. But Everywhere is a perfect, like, Birds-like harmony. It's just a gorgeous selection. Steve Barton on guitar and voice, Robert Darlington guitar and voice, David Sheff drums, and Larry Decker on bass guitar. They had a moment in the 80s, several years. I think some of the songs were picked up maybe on soundtracks. This is their debut from 1982 again. This is produced by David Kahn, who would produce a lot of the records on 415. Later I believe he would go on and hook up with Paul McCartney to do Driving Rain and put together the musicians that became Paul's touring band, the same musicians he has today. David Kahn produced this out of San Francisco. I like all the records. They're really interesting, and they're pretty consistent, but I really like this a lot. It's, again, that early 80s power pop thing. That's more of that, not punk at all, but kind of, you know, dressing up, put a tie on, that look rather than the punk look, because that's not what they were. Translator out of San Francisco, their debut album from 1982 on 415/Columbia Records. 1979, Cut by the Slits. This is their debut album. UK British punk, post-punk band, all-female band, probably the first all-female post-punk band that really got known, that really made a mark in the scene in the UK. 1979 album. Obviously, there was some controversy somewhat with the cover. After this first album, one of their band members left the band, and I did not really follow beyond this. But I did get the original Antilles version of this that came out back in 1979. I think it was on Island Records in the UK. This is a reissue from several years ago because somehow that record got lost along the way, which is very rare in my collection. Now, they're really a loose band, really a raw punk sound with a lot of reggae thrown into it. I think one of their early tours, maybe their first tour, they opened up for The Clash. And you know, obviously a lot of the UK British punk bands celebrated and were very influenced by reggae and dub. So there's a very looseness to this. And they also influenced a lot of, obviously, bands in this country. Later in the 80s, the Riot Girl scene from Olympia, Washington here. I would say Sleater-Kinney somewhat. Sleater-Kinney is probably more refined than at least this album is. But this is actually pretty melodic for a post-punk thing, somewhat. Great vocals in that punk way. Very loose. This is a fun record. After this time, I remember getting into this, and I think this they started in the 76 or 77 originally, but the first album came out in 79. In San Francisco, we had a trio called the Contortions. Contractions, excuse me, the Contractions that started in 79, 80. And I used to see them a lot. A 3-woman band, post-punk somewhat, heavy bass player, Kathy Peck out of that band, really started this organization for musicians who got ear damage, and because she got ear damage early on, and in fact pulled in Pete Townsend to help with that organization because of his situation. But I just bring that on because, listening to this band influenced a lot of these bands in this country too who are listening to this record. Very influential record. Just a fantastic record, but very raw. And the women that came around a few years earlier, obviously Chrissie Hynde with the Pretenders, again more refined, better songwriting, but again, music's not a competition, just very different, and had a longer lifespan. And Susie and the Banshees, so around that period in the same way. So love this record, The Slits, and this is cut. It was reissued about 5 years ago, this version. This record, has a bittersweet story to it. Well, this is a comp, and I think this is the perfect entry point for this artist. And this is Charlie Magira, Tomorrow's Gone. This is Numero Group. This is a double album. I believe it's a double album comp of songs he made 7 albums. Now, Charlie Magira had this sort of character persona of an artist, of a musician, and he's from Israel, but he toured the States. He lived in the States for a while. He lived in Berlin. His music is sort of this hybrid. In the essence, if you deep down and strip off all the effects and all the reverb, it's really rock and roll, sometimes way slowed down. Obviously, you could hear Everly Brothers and surf music. He's got a twangy, Dick Dale-like surf guitar sound, heavily overprocessed reverb and effects pedals, electronics, and his moody vocals on here. It's just got it's got a real looseness, but experimental at times, but catchy too. It's a very soothing record, and it's very ghost-like. Now, since it's a comp, it goes over the entire run of his catalog. I think I have a total of 3 of his albums, including this, so 2 other albums. Numerical Group represses this every once in a while. It seems to come in and out of print. I suggest if you see it, grab it if you like that description. Numero Group also always does these beautiful packages. There's what he looks like. He has sort of this rooster-like pompadour. And Numero Group also puts out really kind of nice visuals in terms of booklets. I never saw him. I wish I had. He was born in 79. He only lived to be 44 years old, and he hung himself. He had bouts of depression. He moved around from the States to Berlin to back to Israel. But a really, really good feel. Again, very influenced by not only Link Wray, Dick Dale, but the Cramps. So there is that side. If you know the Cramps, they do almost like a punk version of rockabilly, rock punk, psych punk, I guess. Psych-a-punk. But just an amazing collection of songs. And that infamous picture of him, I have that on a t-shirt. It's just a great image. And this is a really wonderful record. Here's this discography right there. I long for them to come back in print. I know I think that's his debut. That has been reissued in the last several years. So if you see that one, pick it up too, because they're very similar. But again, this is just a stupendous album, and it's a great midnight play for you to enjoy. I just love this record. If you like that, grab it. So here are 5 records. There's a thread sometimes when I pull these records. There's a mood I'm in for the type of music I tend to pull for these. That's the Music Stupid. Thank you. Watch again next time. Do all the things. Subscribe, like, and just support music. Support the music anyway. Support your independent record dealer. Mazzy loves you.